So I recently posed a question on X, formerly known as Twitter, regarding the overall state of Black America. And I wanted to read some of the feedback because I think they definitely open up an interesting conversation. So, my question on whether or not Black America is a dying breed, in your opinion. So, yeah, a bit of a provocative question, but nevertheless something that I think is worth engaging with given all this online gender war BS, right? So here it says, by natural causes, no, statistically, Black Americans are a growing demographic by birth rates. The browning of America is a real phenomenon. Is there economic survival dying? Absolutely. So regarding the browning of America, right, this is again largely talking about the influx of immigrants from non-white countries, whether it be from Latin America, Asia, and a little bit from Africa. But to my understanding, some of the fastest growing populations are coming out of Asia, specifically the Indian community, and then also coming from Latin America. Mexico, right, in California, you see a huge influx in the Mexican population, largely because of its border and the like. So the browning of America very much is a thing, right? But I don't necessarily think it is as a result of a whole bunch of different Black people having babies or an influx of Black African immigrants. Now, y'all correct me if I'm wrong in the comment section. If y'all have any stats against this, let me know. But to my understanding, the browning of America is coming, again, largely from non-white countries, but certainly not coming from an influx of Black countries. So, but let's continue with some of the other thoughts. I think it's just interesting, worth reading. It says, we are definitely deeply colonized against ourselves. Does this signify dying? Possibly, particularly if we don't awaken. However, I also believe this to be true of most humanity, completely lost in the wilderness of capitalism, violence, and hatred. Just some people profit off of it. He makes a really good point. Younger generations are becoming a lot more critical of capitalism, largely because it's just not working for them the way it did their parents or their grandparents. I think of my grandmother, for example, right, who did not get past the 8th grade reading level, who pretty much spent most of her life cleaning houses. She was a sharecropper, a very, very hard worker, but didn't have some of the opportunities that I have today. She spent a lot of her time doing laundry, cleaning houses, doing things like that. But she was still able to afford a home in the San Francisco Bay Area, her and my grandfather. That is nearly impossible today. You have right now 2 white-collar workers working full-time jobs who cannot afford a home in the San Francisco Bay Area. So just that alone, younger generations are saying that they just don't have it the same way. College tuition for my parents, I think, was $1,000, $2,000. Now going to college will cost you $40,000, $50,000 a year, just depending upon if you want to go to something that's even halfway decent. So just the exponential rise in cost of things with respect to people's wages is really causing people to question the current system and capitalism in a way that I've never seen before. Now, what that's going to mean, I have no idea. And how does that impact the Black community? Well, Black America has kind of always been the bottom of the barrel with economic power. Yeah, you have rich Black people, and we have a lot of consumer power, but how much do we actually own? How much of the industries do we actually own? That's always been a very small amount in Black America. So I thought that was an interesting comment. Let's go right down over here. Right here it says, okay, the average Black person in America, in the USA, isn't looking to create their own economy, but most are just worker bees looking to work for someone, not work for oneself and providing a service to people. Okay, the average Black person in the USA isn't looking to create their own economy. Most are just worker bees looking to work for someone, not work for oneself and providing a service to the people to be responsible for themselves and their people. I would actually say that that's true for most people in general. America and the educational system is not about teaching people how to be self-thinkers, how to run their own businesses. It's really about teaching people how to be great workers. I would say that's true across the board for a lot of people. Now, this right here, it goes into abortion. I really want to do a deep dive on this before I look, because y'all know that not all stats are created equal, right? So take this with a grain of salt. But if what's being said here is true, it says 900 plus melanated children deleted every day, I'm speechless. If what is being said here is true, then there is a silent genocide going on every single day within Black America by Black Americans, by Black American women. If that is the case, I don't want it to be true. I do not want those numbers to be true. I need to verify that before I say anything. But if the numbers are that high, that is substantial. Forget about Black male nakers going out and supposedly deleting women every 5 minutes or whatever. Even if that was the case, even if those stats were the case, which I've already verified multiple times in previous videos are false, but even if that is true, that does not equate to 900 plus babies a day who are being deleted out of the womb of their women. Not to mention the curses that are invited on the land when you shed that amount of innocent bloodshed. I don't think people really fully understand what these kinds of lifestyle choices mean, how they impact not only yourself, but future generations in this society. So again, I hope that's wrong. I really hope that's wrong. I want to do a little bit more research, but if it is true, that is a huge problem that cannot be overlooked. Now let's continue this. Now this one was interesting. It says, these comments are encouraging. Let's remember that the golden era with vibrant communities and a higher marriage and legitimacy rate was in our grandparents' lifetime. It's not too late to right the ship. Now this is so interesting because a lot of times I'll hear this when we hear different Black Americans kind of going back and forth about the current state of things and then referencing the past. And sometimes they'll use terms like, golden era and the good old days, and kind of creating this like utopian idea that Black people were living such beautiful, amazing lives back in like the 50s and 60s and even the 70s. And I'm like, there has never been a time in Black America where they were at peace fully, never. Certainly not during the time of slavery, certainly not during the time of Reconstruction, certainly not during Jim Crow, certainly not during the crack era, certainly not during gentrification. Like you guys, like there's never been a time where Black people were like, there's been like a golden era. Now, yes, there are times when we were more married, right? And of course there's different implications to look at. Just the culture was different in general. Women in general just tended to marry more. People tended to just stay together more, largely due to social pressure. A woman who had a baby out of wedlock was still shamed no matter what culture you came from. So that's that element. And then there's also the element of the fact that like Black people were working together and having communities because they weren't allowed in white communities. It wasn't because they were like, getting along so well and they're just so utopian and it's like, wow, we just want to build Wakanda. It's like they weren't allowed in those other communities. They weren't getting the funding. So they were forced literally from nothing to try to build stuff. A lot of times Black standards when it came to Black schools and when it came to, grocery stores, when it came to stores, they weren't to the level of white standards because they weren't given the governmental funding, which is partially why many of them actually fight for civil rights because they wanted more of that funding. So when we talk about the golden era, I think it's really important to bring in context. And this is where it's actually good to talk to elders, right? This is where it's good to like talk to people in your family who were like at that time or have personal stories, because they will tell you it was not peaches and cream. They were not like walking in the park. Many of them were running for their life. Many of them, they stayed together partially as a means of survival because they depended upon one another to not be lynched and not be killed. And so when I see people talking about, the golden era, like back in the 50s and 60s, I'm like, do you know what was going on in the 50s and 60s? Oh, the golden era back in the 20s. I'm like, hello, do you know what was going on in the 20s? So it's always been hard for Black folks in America, period. I'm not saying that there haven't been successful people. Obviously there have been. And I'm not saying you can't be happy. You absolutely can. Just talk to an elder and they'll tell you the truth. Okay. Says, I will say African Americans will and are assimilating to the greater American identity and culture. And if that is true, if African Americans are assimilating to the greater American identity and culture, then I guess to a certain extent, it is over time going to breed out, because if you're assimilating, if you're integrating to another culture, if you're kind of becoming a part of that culture, that at some point is going to mean that your culture dilutes. At the very least, it changes and merges. It's no longer what it was before. It says 2 more generations max. They think there's no hope. It says it doesn't exist. We can't let it die. Because the answer is yes. No, but we're in critical condition. No, but the way Afro-Americans are embarrassing white right-wing ideologies is concerning. So here's one. If not a dying breed, we are a stagnant breed. We keep hovering at 14% of the U.S. population. The Latinos are 19 and counting with the open borders. So that goes back to what I was saying before. That if you talk about the browning of America, that I think more likely is coming from immigrants from, Latin American countries and other places where, first of all, abortions just are not really a perspective in their culture. It has a lot to do with why they're just having longer kids. There's cultural shaming associated with it. It says, yes, and thank God, Black American culture is going back to that early 60s, 70s where we had pride in ourselves. We are slowly but surely getting away from the thug culture, and that's just fine with me. So this one is really interesting to me, right? When you're thinking about the thought and the thug culture, because first of all, I want it to be clear, that thought and the thug culture is not being promoted or funded by Black people. Just let that be clear. BET, a lot of these record labels that have all these Black rappers, Pimo rappers, gangster rappers, hip hop, whatever. Hip hop itself, it's been gentrified and also is not funded by Black people. So who are the ones who are going around promoting an image of Black folks that many Black people in like their personal life don't agree with? So it's important to know that when you're thinking about these tropes that impact Black people, many of them don't actually come from Black people. They didn't sit down and just create a whole bunch of different ideas and say, okay, we're just going to think about all the different ways to disgrace Black folks. So we didn't create that. That was just largely a result of being an oppressed people class. That was largely a result of just being an oppressed class of people. And then the ramifications of that over the years, as you know, this people has tried to navigate, assimilate into the culture and figure out how to build from literally ground zero. So you have nope. So you have people who are like, nope, it's not dying. But then you have yes, you have yep. So there's definitely a mix, different people talking about birth rates, different people talking about abortions. So honestly, I just wanted to ask this question because I more importantly wanted to get a sense of where everyone was at. Now, to be clear, X, formerly known as Twitter, certainly is not it's not going to be a perfect explanation of what's going on in the Black community, but it does just give me a sense of where people are at. Now, my personal opinion is that, if you think of Black America or Black American culture, it certainly doesn't have to die if people see it as a value of worth keeping, of people see it as a value of worth maintaining and trying to improve and strengthen. But that really depends upon Black folks. It really depends upon Black American people. Like if I think of Black people who are actually going about building and doing positive things. For example, I'll use my husband, right? One of the reasons I love him is he has such a big heart, and he's oftentimes not online because he's actually busy doing stuff, right? Recently, he had an event in Oakland, California, where all these different Black-owned businesses came together and were supporting each other and are thinking about, okay, how do we bring more money into the Black community, being busy tutoring kids, teaching young Black kids about math and science, and essentially doing things that are going to impact the community, right? That's not a person, or that's not a thing that's going to be getting viral online, but those are the kinds of things that happen behind closed doors that may not get the attention and may not even get the funding, but are instrumental and integral into improving a Black community. The conversations that are had behind closed doors, right? The pastors who actually do care. And honestly, there's been a lot of Black churches that have completely sold out. But those pastors who actually do care about their people, who actually do care about the ones who are pastoring, the things that they do behind closed doors, the conversations, the way that they pray, the way that they mentor, those are never going to get probably the tweets and never going to get the attention. But those are the things that are integral to actually determining whether or not a community is maintained. It's the soft power, right? It's the things that are done behind closed doors. It's the family being built. It's the little things that make a difference. So whether or not Black America is going to be a healthy, growing breed or a dying breed really depends on Black Americans, really depends upon what we do every single day. One of the reasons I'm online is because I want younger generations at one point to be able to look back and know that there is a difference. I want them to know that this media programming, the loudest voice, is not necessarily the only voice, and it's not the best voice. And so that's why I do what I do, because I'm like, look, it's my responsibility as a Black woman, I feel, to use my gifts and to use my platform, however big or small it may be, to spread the truth and to model through my life how actually rejecting the world's narrative and embracing God's ways and embracing God's truth and living a life that is devoted to honesty and loving my community and living a life for Christ and trying to model the ethics of faith, hope, and love, right? And model the ethics of being different and being transformed and transforming those around us. Like, that's why I'm doing what I'm doing. But I understand that's not everybody's call. I understand that's not everybody's passion. And I understand that not everybody is going to be interested in that. So I think whether or not the community or not changes is really up to the Black community. There's this one passage that I love for you Bible thumpers out there that I think actually, although it was written thousands of years, it is so pertinent to the Black community. And it literally says, if my people which are called by my name shall humble themselves and pray and seek my face and turn from their wicked ways, then will I hear from heaven, and I will forgive their sins and I will heal their land. And that's eventually the Most High talking to people and saying, look, I don't care how detrimental your situation is. If you turn to me and if you take on my ways, follow the laws of the universe that I have established, I will heal you. I will heal your land. I will heal your situation, and I will bring you out of this bondage that you're in, whether it be physically, psychologically, emotionally, all of the above. And so I so believe that is true. I so believe that if today you had enough people who said, you know what, I'm going to just reject the world's craziness and I'm now going to take on God's ways. I'm going to be more committed about my spirituality. I'm going to be more committed about learning about righteousness. I'm going to be more committed about now loving my neighbor, about now loving and respecting my community, about loving and respecting my kinfolk, my race, my culture. If more people did that, things actually could change around, right? But that's dependent upon the individual, that's dependent upon the community and whether or not they want to exist. And only God knows. So, but as for me, I'm gonna do what I believe is right. And because ultimately I stand before God. I can't control anybody else, but I can at least do my part to try to shine in my own little section of the world. And hopefully you'll do the same. Anyways, those are my thoughts. What do you think? Do you agree? Do you disagree? Let me know. Leave your questions, comments, concerns in the comment section below. Thank you so much for listening if you've gotten this far. And we'll talk later. Bye.